Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolutely incredible true story of persistence, resilience, and a quest for justice that literally spans continents and decades. This is the story of Holocaust survivor Ralph Jacobson, but honestly, it's not just a standard biography. It's really the story of a son who acted like a relentless, hard-boiled detective to solve a mystery that had been completely buried by history for over half a century.
Picture this. It's 1994. You're living a nice, peaceful retirement, enjoying life. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, you receive a book from Germany, your birthplace. And inside this book is a claim that totally shatters everything you thought you knew. It actually states that your father, who died back in 1938 when you were just a boy, committed suicide. Now, this is exactly what happened to Ralph Jacobson. For 60 years, he had been told his dad died of a heart attack. And suddenly, here's an official record telling him a completely different, horrifying story.
Okay, let's dive into this. Ralph was absolutely 100% certain his father didn't take his own life. The family already had papers ready to leave Germany for the United States. There was hope on the horizon, right? His father simply wouldn't have just given up. So, Ralph, tapping into his decades of experience as a lawyer, made this fierce, unwavering determination to clear his father's name. He and his wife Vivian literally packed up and traveled back to Germany to debunk that fake 1938 death certificate and uncover what actually happened on that fateful morning of October 8th.
Act 1. Uncovering the garden murder. Let's look at the facts. And this brilliantly illustrates what Ralph was up against. To figure out what he found, we've got to look at the evidence exactly like an investigator walking into a 1930s crime scene. Ralph methodically gathered documents, and man, the glaring holes in the official Nazi narrative popped up almost immediately. The official report claimed his dad, Ernst, hung himself in his garden house and was found by a family friend named Ella Edelstein. But Ralph, playing the relentless detective, uncovered the real facts. First, his mother was actually home waiting for Ernst to come back for lunch when she got a call to go to the hospital. Second, this supposed witness, Ella, lived a full mile away and didn't even own a car, which was super common for Jewish citizens at the time anyway.
So Ralph systematically dismantles the suicide story by just looking at the physical logistics of the garden itself. It's like a giant puzzle, and the pieces just don't fit. The space was surrounded by these massive 8-foot-high hedges with a wooden door that locked automatically. His father had to use a specific key just to get in. On top of that, the police report claimed a laundry rope was used, but there was zero laundry equipment anywhere on that property or even at their main house a mile away. And get this, the supposed witness, Ayla, was a very heavy-set woman who physically could not have made that mile-long walk to the garden. The entire scene was staged.
So you have to ask yourself, if it wasn't a suicide, who killed Ernst Jacobson and why? Well, the motive was deeply, tragically political. Ernst was the only practicing Jewish lawyer left in town, and he was vigorously fighting the local mayor's plan to bulldoze a beautiful synagogue just to build a headquarters for the SS. The mayor, who conveniently also happened to be the police chief, wanted Ernst out of the picture. But back in 1938, the regime didn't quite want the public relations nightmare of murdering Jewish citizens openly yet, so they had Ernst followed to his private garden, murdered him, and literally forged the paperwork to make the whole thing look like a suicide.
By compiling this absolute mountain of evidence and submitting a brilliant legal brief alongside his childhood friend, Ralph actually achieved the impossible. In 1999, we're talking more than 6 decades after his father's murder, the city of Osnabrück issued a new, corrected death certificate. Ralph solved the cold case. He corrected the historical record. But honestly, to truly appreciate the magnitude of this victory, we've got to look at the man who actually pulled it off.
Act 2. Escaping to America. The Roots of Resilience.
Seriously, how does a young boy who lost his father to such a brutal, terrifying regime grow up to hold that exact same regime accountable? Well, it started with a desperate escape on his 11th birthday in 1939. When Ralph and his mother finally arrived in the United States, they had a grand total of $50. That's it, $50 to start a completely new life in a foreign country. Yet Ralph brought with him this absolute, relentless determination to succeed, and just a profound, deep gratitude for simply being alive.
But let's be real, America wasn't without its own severe hurdles. Ralph faced systemic xenophobia and anti-Semitism practically from the moment he stepped off the boat. An immigration clerk heavily pressured him to change his last name to Jackson, just to hide his heritage. He compromised by changing his first name from Rudolph to Rolf, but he kept Jacobson. Growing up, kids mocked him because he couldn't speak English. Later on, despite graduating right at the top of his class, major law firms in 1955 outright refused to hire Jewish attorneys. Even during his very successful corporate career, he was passed over for a chief counsel role due to sheer prejudice. and even had to deal with a boss who openly, right to his face, denied that the Holocaust ever happened. Can you imagine?
But through all of this, Ralph just refused to let prejudice dictate his happiness. He thrived anyway. He learned English perfectly, graduated cum laude from both the City College of New York and NYU Law School, served his new country in the U.S. Army, and built this incredibly fulfilling 32-year career as a top tax lawyer for Sears. And maybe best of all, he met his wife Vivian on a blind date, which kicked off a beautiful, fiercely devoted 64-year marriage.
Act 3, a legacy of action.
Now, what's really interesting about all this is what happened when Ralph retired. He moved down to Pinehurst, North Carolina in 1990, but he didn't just kick back and hit the golf course. He totally refused to be a victim of his past. Instead, he became this massive pillar of action for his community. He took his survival, his legal expertise, and all that resilience and channeled it into giving back. He and Vivian actually co-founded the Sandhills Jewish Congregation in an area that barely had any Jewish families before. He practiced law strictly on a pro bono basis, helping disabled vets, public school teachers, and Native American groups. He spent 2 solid decades advising small businesses through SCORE, and even helped build Hillcrest Park, this huge 45-acre sports facility for local kids. He literally built the world he wanted to live in.
And there's this one specific story that I think captures his spirit perfectly. Ralph spent years volunteering at the McCain Prison Center, basically counseling inmates who were about to be released on how to secure jobs and housing. One afternoon, he decided to share his own story of surviving Nazi Germany and overcoming all that immense adversity. When he finished speaking, every single one of the 22 inmates in that room stood up and gave him a standing ovation.
His wife, Vivian, really summed up their entire life in North Carolina so beautifully. She pointed out that building this thriving community and family was their ultimate triumph over a regime that tried to erase them. As she put it was kind of like my answer to Hitler. We're alive and well in Pinehurst. They didn't just survive the darkest chapter of history, they flourished.
Act 4. Why this matters today. For the last 25 years of his life, Ralph dedicated himself to Holocaust education. He even lectured to a crowd of 250 people in the exact same German courthouse in Osnabrück, where his father had been disbarred simply for being Jewish. During these talks, Ralph would constantly pose this really critical question to the audience. What does the Holocaust teach us today? Because it's so easy for us to just view these events as distant, dusty history. But for Ralph, who lived through it and spent years untangling the mystery of his father's murder, the lessons were immediate, they were urgent, and they are incredibly relevant to our society right now.
So the crucial point is this stark warning Ralph left us with. There's no depth to what humanity can sink to. He stressed that with modern weapons and modern technology, unspeakable horrors could absolutely happen again. And he was very specific in calling out the dangerous political weaponization of Holocaust denial. He noted that when certain global political leaders or public figures deny the Holocaust, they aren't just ignoring history. They're actively using that denial as a strategic political weapon to attack and delegitimize groups of people today. But here's the thing, Ralph didn't leave his audiences drowning in despair. He actually left them with a blueprint for a much better future. His message really boiled down to 3 simple yet deeply profound steps. Maintain friendships, choose kindness, and refuse to forget. And remarkably, while he was very clear that he could not forgive the specific individuals who murdered his father, he made the active choice to forgive the modern nation and the people of Germany, building real friendships across old divides to promote peace. Ralph Jacobson's entire life shows us that while solving a cold case is about uncovering facts, solving our deeper societal issues requires persistent, resilient action. Community and truth are literally the ultimate weapons against hatred. I mean, the guy arrived with $50 in his pocket and went on to build a legacy of justice, education, and love. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. In your own life, when you are faced with adversity or injustice, what will you choose to build and what will you choose to remember?